Episode 4 of 7 Worlds, 1 Planet. It's called Australia. So this episode opens up in the north of Australia, but it's a lot more tropical. Here we see cassowaries. They do a good job of establishing, right at the beginning of the episode, how prehistoric Australia actually is. It's separated off when the dinosaurs were still alive, which explains why a lot of the animals have sort of evolved independently, or a lot of them are remnants of that time. And the cassowaries are a good animal to start with, because they lead in very well from that, because they're probably the most prehistoric and dinosaur-looking thing in Australia. The crest helps, the fact that they're really iridescent really helps. They just look quite prehistoric. And this sequence basically follows a father cassowary leading his two chicks around the forest towards water and food. It's fine, we see the one cassowary chick wander off. We talk about how there's a lot of predators there. I will say this bit didn't really hit quite as much because most of the predators were tiny animals like spiders, quite small pythons that I don't think would really take on a cassowary. Maybe the monitor lizards would, but it's good showing you how paternal the cassowaries are because they've already discussed how prehistoric they are and dinosaur-like, which sort of makes you think they're pretty cold and, unforgiving. The fact that it's looking after its chick is quite nice. And yeah, it's a good way of opening the episode. Australia is a really weird place, so you really need a weird animal to open up, and cassowaries do look pretty weird, so pretty good stuff. Then we talk about how isolated Australia is, how not a lot of animals could really get there, however, bats did, and bats are really the only sort of placental mammals that actually made it to Australia naturally. Australian flying foxes are the largest of the bats. They're pretty cool to look at, I think they're just cool to see, and here we see them going down to get a drink. To do this, they've got to basically land in the water, collect some water in their fur and then drink it afterwards. However, the water's not a safe place because it's full of crocodiles. And we see the crocodiles just grabbing the bats. It was really cool. We had seen this in Life of Mammals, probably more in depth, but obviously as technology has moved on a lot since then, this was a really well filmed bit of footage. It was cool getting a shot of the river downstream, which gave you a really good view of just how many crocodiles were in the water. Like, basically every couple of metres is a crocodile, and obviously loads of bats are diving down to get water, so the chances of them catching a bat are, pretty high. And some of the shots of the bats just slipping away at the crocodile's grasp are really cool. Then we kind of move away from that, we go to the south of Australia, where it's really cold. It's basically the antithesis to the north. And here we see there's some animals knocking about, kangaroos, which look pretty out of place here. You don't really expect to see kangaroos in the snow. You're much more used to seeing them in grasslands or deserts. Really weird seeing them here. And we focus a lot on wombats. The wombats were really cool. It was just nice seeing the wombats. They're basically just digging around, eating food, shuffling through the snow. They're not doing anything, amazing, but because you don't see wombats that often, they are pretty cool to see. And yeah, it's probably some of the best wombat footage we've had, to be honest, so I like that. And we talk a lot about the geography. We talk about how isolated it was, how it's moved away, and how all these kind of habitats have formed. Most of the continent is desert. As it moved to a more tropical place, things got warmer. It's not quite as maybe interesting as some of the other geography sequences we've had in other episodes, but it's pretty cool. I did enjoy that. And we take a look at the grasslands. Here we see loads of kangaroos in a much more natural environment. We see the herds there. They're pretty cool. They've got joeys, all nice stuff. And we see them getting hunted by dingoes. And the dingo sequence is really good. For starters, I think compared to most other dog species, they're probably the ones that look the most like dogs, I think. Especially that one female that's white. She kind of looks like a patchy stray or something. But seeing the dingoes hunt the kangaroos is really cool, because that's not something I've seen in any of these big documentaries. I think I've seen it in like a small one when I was younger, in like, I don't know, Natural Geographic or Animal Planet or something. But it definitely wasn't like a full-blown hunt. This is definitely the first time we've got that. And it's really good. The tension's great. And the fact that that one female stands out so much because she's white, apart from the orange patches, really helps you focus on her and kind of view her as a very easy protagonist. Really see how hard the kangaroos are to catch, how kind of out of the element the dingoes are sometimes, but the dingoes are very clever. They are dogs. It was really cool watching the female create an ambush and lead them into sort of higher ground that wasn't easier for the kangaroos to move on. Really good stuff. I really like that. And I think the fact that you've seen her kill a kangaroo, an animal that we're more familiar with and like a lot more than dingoes. I mean, when you think of dingoes, you think of, the stereotypical, someone shouting, "A dingo's got me baby," that kind of thing. And seeing the dingo with her pups was nice. It helps you remember that this is an animal that's struggling, that's, got his family to look after. It was really good. I think it's probably the best dingo sequence we've had. Not that we've had very many in these series, or really any other ones, to be honest. But it was very good, and I think that would be hard to top in another series. And then we go to the gum forests. Here we kind of get a little bit of a snapshot of various animals like koalas, echidnas. We don't really focus on them at all, to be honest. It kind of feels like because it's Australia, there's an expectation to talk about certain animals. And, we've spent a bit of time with kangaroos already, so we've got to get the other heavy hitters in, like koalas, echidnas to a lesser extent. It was still cool seeing them though, but the main thing there is the Jotus jumping spider. Jumping spiders are just cool. I think they're just really interesting animals. As far as spiders go, they're probably some of the most interesting. We see one female going out catching prey, and then there's a male that's trying to attract her. He's waving his palps about, trying to attract her over, and it's just cool. I think these sequences are always pretty great, and there is an element of intrigue there, because the female might actually just eat the male if she fancies it, but thankfully she doesn't, and the male is able to mate with her. It's quite a nice sequence, and I think because spiders are animals that aren't very popular among people, they're the ones people are scared of the most. I think jumping spiders are a good kind of gateway into changing that, because they're quite cool, they're very clever, and they're just very watchable, I think. So I really like that. And then we move to the deserts. We spend quite an extended period of time talking about how, bleak the deserts are in Australia. They're massive. They're basically being stripped bare by winds. And we talk about how this really is the domain of reptiles. And the biggest of those is the parenti, which is a massive monitor lizard. And they do a good job of showing you how intimidating it is. It's very similar to the start when you're talking about how cassowaries are really prehistoric. The parenti kind of fills that role as well. And we see going after other lizards like bearded dragons, skinks, all these lizards that I think we're all aware of. And they look pretty cool. The thorny devil's the one we focus on the most though. I think thorny devils just look weird, they're very iconic. But I thought what was really interesting about this, the first time I watched it, was watching the way the thorny devil drinks. Because it basically just sits in a puddle, and because it doesn't want to look down, it just sits there and absorbs it through its skin. Because the grooves in its skin are essentially like really thin paper, are quite absorbent, and you just watch the water travelling up the side of its body, and eventually that's able to reach its mouth, and it's just soaking wet, it just glistens with the water. That was really cool, because that's not something I ever knew about. As far as desert adaptations go, it's probably one of the more impressive ones, and the parenti ultimately eats a bearded dragon, with the thorny devil does get away. That's the one we care about the most from this sequence. And it was really cool. I just thought it was good. I think because Australia has just so many reptiles, we did have to focus on them. And reptiles don't tend to get as much love as, say, mammals, birds, or even insects in a lot of these series. I think it was good to highlight that. So yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool sequence as well. Also in the outback, we see budgies, another really recognisable animal. It is so weird seeing wild budgies, especially in Australia, because you're used to just seeing them in people's houses. Certainly I am. It was really cool, and watching the massive flocks of them was great. Them getting attacked by the birds of prey was cool. It was just really good, and I think the fact that it was the first time I'd really seen wild budgies in anything before, the first time I watched it, was very cool. And then we moved to the coral reefs, the other main part of Australia. I feel like we're just hitting all the major habitats in this episode, and here we see there's loads of fish, but mainly we focus on the sharks. We don't actually identify the sharks. There's some sort of reef shark, and they basically go out for all these deep sea fish that are out there, and they don't actually eat them though, they just kind of herd them towards the coast, and all these sharks come in, and then even more fish come in, and even more sharks come in, and all the sharks lead them right the way, pretty much up to the beach. And there's this massive congregation of fish. I mean, it's, as far as bait balls go, this isn't really a bait ball. This is just like, I don't know, a bait city. It's massive. There's so many fish there. And at this point, the sharks then dive in and feed. Really interesting stuff. It's really cool. I think when this sequence started, I was like, okay, I remember this being okay. But no, it was very good. It was definitely memorable. I think it was just so impressive watching all these sharks herding all this fish. It's not something you think about. You tend to think of sharks as being just kind of mindless killing machines, but this showed you there's some strategy to what they're doing. And then we go to Tasmania. Again, another really iconic part of Australia that we don't really see very often. And of course, here we talk about Tasmanian devils. It's at night, we see a mother Tasmanian devil go out and feed on a wallaby carcass on the beach. It isn't that long, but we do talk about how, powerful they are. They've got massive jaws for the size of them. It was quite cool. And watching our young kind of play about, try to learn what animals to eat was quite fun as well. Because I think Tasmanian devils are an animal we're all aware of, mostly because of the Looney Tunes. But we don't really see them very often, and they're pretty cool in their own right. There's nothing else like them out there, really. And then we get to the depressing part of the episode. Until the end, this episode doesn't really have a massive environmental message. But here we talk about how there's been mass extinctions of mammals just over the last 200 years, and there's evidence of Tasmanian devils way in the north of Australia, in cave drawings. There's loads of things there, like you can see wallabies, you can see various birds. It's very interesting, because a lot of these animals aren't really as abundant, or even there anymore in some areas. Very interesting. We talk about the thylacine, obviously that's the most iconic one, and that iconic footage of the last ever thylacine that existed in zoos back in the 1930s is iconic. It's great, it's very well used here. I don't think the plight of mammals in Australia was something I was as aware of, compared to other things that were discussed, like deforestation, palm oil, climate change. All that kind of stuff was a lot more in the forefront of my mind. I wasn't as aware of this. And that's why I'm glad they talked about that. And to be honest, it was one of the more effective environmental messages in the series. So I really thought that was very good. And it was a very effective way of ending the episode. And then the diaries is all about the people filming the dingoes. And again, much like the pumas in the last episode, they did a really good job of highlighting the way they felt to the audience. They clearly were invested in this one white dingo story, so we were then invested. Really translated from the camera to the screen. Also, like the pumas, it didn't really heighten my enjoyment of the sequence. I already thought it was pretty good anyway. But yeah, it was pretty good. It was a pretty good sequence. So yeah, this episode is really good. I think the first time I watched this, I wasn't as big on it for some reason. But every time I've watched it since, I've liked it a lot more. And I thought this is a really, really good episode. Like everything else in this series, is really good. Highlights for me, again, probably the dingoes hunting the kangaroos is the best bit. The thorny devils were good. The stuff at the end with the mammals was good. The Tasmanian devil. Pretty much everything was pretty good, to be honest. I really like this episode. It's very good. I think something I've realised watching this series again is that it really makes you want to travel. More than other series, I think. This one makes me want to go out and just see animals in the world. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this episode. What were your highlights? Let me know. Next week I'll be doing the next one, which is all about Europe, so look forward to that. And yeah, as ever, feel free to like, comment and subscribe, or don't if you don't want to. I'll survive if you don't, it's fine. And yeah, I'll see you next time, and goodbye.